Welcome to the What to Read Next podcast. In this podcast, your host, Lori Amin, will interview published authors to chat about their work, journey to getting published, and their book recommendations. If you share a passion for books and always looking for your next read, then join us. Hi, Sherry. Welcome to What to Read Next podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for me. I'm glad to be here.
I'm so excited to chat with you. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
I write genre fiction. So I started in romance, in historical romance specifically. I have also written 4 young adult books, 3 of which are fantasy, and 1 is a retelling of the original Ballad of Mulan. But more recently, what I've been most steadily writing more recently are historical mysteries. I write a set of historical mysteries called the Lady Sherlock books. And they basically posit what if the fictional Sherlock Holmes, what if those deeds in those stories have been inspired by the real life and adventures of a woman named Charlotte Holmes who lived, in the late Victorian era.
Mm-hmm. So when inspired you to write some Victorian historical mysteries? Why Lady Sherlock series? What was the source of inspiration?
I've always liked Sherlock Holmes, though I wasn't wasn't crazy about those stories. I've always liked Sherlock Holmes, and I've always liked the retellings of the original Sherlock Holmes stories. I think I read my first retelling right around the same time as I read the Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, those original stories. And I thought, wow, this retelling goes into much, much greater detail and, kind of plug the holes rather interestingly of what was there in the original story. So I was 11 or 12 at the time. And even then I liked the retellings really well. So then when I read Laurie R. King's The Beekeeper's Apprentice, which was her take on Sherlock Holmes and giving Sherlock Holmes a young female equivalent, somebody who's exactly like him in mind and temperament. And I thought that book was awesome, but I didn't know how to write mysteries at the time, so I let it stay for a bit. And then when BBC Sherlock came out, I was like, I really, really want to do something like this because it was so cool. It was so awesome. You remember how that first season came out and we were all on fire. And and by the time I had actually, without quite intending it, written a mystery. The second book in my young adult fantasy series, as it turned out, was a mystery because it was about two young mages waking up in the Sahara Desert without any memories of either who they are or how they got there. And it was kind of like this back and forth story. And by the end of which they figured out. And I was like, you know what, that is a mystery. And I was rather satisfied with that book. So I thought, okay, maybe now I have the skills to tackle a mystery head on. So actually, I had first proposed Lady Sherlock, back then called Girl Sherlock books, to my young adult publisher. I had intended it to be like a contemporary series with just a young girl. At the time, in my head, she was in the very beginning, she was going to middle school. So this would have been either lower YA or upper middle grade. I'm not sure. She might have grown up a bit in the story. So maybe lower YA. And my YA editor says, well, unfortunately, mysteries don't sell very well in YA. So I was like, that's a no then, huh? So then I turned around to my adult publisher and said, what about you guys? They said, we'll bite. And I figure if I'm targeting the adult market, I had better set it in the same time period that the original Sherlock Holmes stories take place, which was the 80s and the 90s. And it so happened that was when all my historical romances took place. So I was familiar with the era, and I was like, good. That's actually one less obstacle on my way to writing a historical mystery.
So I love this. And the series has evolved to 6 books. And so there's different storylines and stuff. How do you keep track of all the different characters, different storylines, different Easter eggs? How do you keep track of all that, as it evolves, into 6 book series or future books?
Well, it's actually, I didn't have an overarching plan of what exactly was going to be there. I just thought it should have there should be a story arc, kind of like you know how Veronica Mars would have one huge mystery in the big season, and then each individual episode might have some smaller problem to solve also. I thought I want to do something like that, because it's, you know, we're in the peak TV and people are much more used to interconnected storytelling. So I wanted that. And the reason the books have actually ended up being even a little more interconnected than I thought they would be was because often at the beginning of a new book, I wouldn't know what to write. So while I try to figure out what to write, I look back to see what the characters did in the previous book and where everything was, and just like basically pick up from there. So I'm often looking at what I already written for inspiration or for story ideas or for natural development. So that's in a way I'm like keeping track on how the story develops even as I write new stuff.
I love this. Yeah, I felt that it was just like a perfect binge series. Like you just like binge them like back to back, and you get so much from the story. You get the storyline, like the whole idea. You're going to immerse in the world, and so I just kind of like fine. So you're on book 6. So tell us a little bit about book 6. What can readers expect?
Well, with the BBC Sherlock, I really loved the first couple of seasons, but I thought it started the whole series as a whole began to falter a little bit after they killed off Moriarty at the end of season 2. And I thought that was, that killed him off too early. And so my goal in my series was that, okay, since Moriarty is Moriarty hardly appears in the original Sherlock Holmes stories, but because Watson or Sherlock Holmes once said, that's his arch enemy, it kind of Moriarty took on like a much more larger than life shape in the popular imagination. And so basically you cannot be a proper Sherlock Holmes series without a nod to Moriarty. And I thought, okay, if that's the case, if I am going to have him an arch enemy, then I will not only not get rid of him too early, I won't even bring him onto the page too early. So for 5 books, Moriarty has been at the background. He's been the background character, but his organization has kind of like been a kind of sort of quiet menace throughout the whole series. But I thought by this point, I'm not entirely sure since I don't know what I'm going to write next, but I thought by this point, it's probably time to bring him at least on page, because I thought we are probably like halfway done with the bigger story arc involving Moriarty. So it's time for him to become an on-page character. But I didn't want him to come as an enemy right away. I wanted him to come in a different guise, in a guise that, both seems less threatening and yet actually presents more problems for Sherlock Holmes, for my Charlotte Holmes, which is that Moriarty came as ostensibly as a supplicant. He came as a client in search of Sherlock Holmes / Charlotte Holmes's help. And he basically needs help looking for his daughter. And his daughter lives in this remote community of occult practitioners, and he is not sure what is going on with her. And so Charlotte gets sent to investigate. And that's how the story came about.
And the story unravels. So what are you working next? Is there another Lady Sherlock book coming up next year? Or
yes, there is. Yeah, I'm working on book 7, and it's usually at this point when the book has most problems, because I've written like sort of like 30,000 words, and only to realize that no, actually the real story isn't what I thought it was. I have oversimplified things in my head. So now I've got to, go back and probably check a fair bit of what I've written, and then, do a better job. But it always happens like this. So even though it's like annoying, it's
well, it's just
what happens every time.
yeah, it's just uncovering the story and just realizing like, oh, this is something different, and talking it out.
Right, exactly. You're right. It's just uncovering the story. Yes.
Yeah. So, do you have any book recommendations you can tell our listeners to pick up? Whether it doesn't have to be, it can be any genre. It doesn't have to be anything. Just whatever books that you would recommend.
You had. I was thinking about this a little earlier, and I thought you had said a very interesting. You have sent along some questions, and you had mentioned about these book recommendations, and I'm one of those people who like always go blank when people suddenly ask me, "What's your favorite this? What's your favorite that? And what do you recommend?" I'm always like, "Oh my god," So this time I thought about it, and I thought, let me recommend some series that people don't necessarily go into it first for the romance, but then they are hooked on the romance. I was like, that's a recommendation I could live with. So first, I want to recommend Megan Whalen Turner. I think it's Megan Whalen Turner's The Queen's Thief series. The first book being The Thief, and The Thief is fantasy. It's about, if you open it, and it's a fantasy. It's about this young boy said to be the thief for some reason, and he's grab along, goes to this adventure and to steal something. Where the series gets really interesting is in book 2. In book 2, a romance came out of nowhere and I am a veteran romance reader, and that book smacked me upside the head when I realized what a love story is, and I was just like, yeah, seriously, I was gobsmacked. It is still one of the most interesting, most unexpected, and kind of most searing, in a way, romance I have ever read. So I will forever be recommending the Queen's Thief series. Next up, some the Golden Age mysteries. I read a bunch of Agatha Christie's, and then I started getting into Dorothy Sayers books. And so her hero is okay. Let me back this up a little bit. Many years ago, I used to hang around all of our romances reader recommendation website. That's when readers sending their own reviews of their favorite books. Like I remember. I remember Lisa Kleypas wrote a review for The Shadow and the Star, which was how I discovered Laura Kinsale. And so someone else, I was like on a roll going through these books that other readers love. And somebody else recommended a book named Gaudy Nights. And so I dutifully hauled myself to the library and got a copy, and was like, I don't know what the heck this is about, but it was really, really difficult to read because it was about one woman going back to was a woman in the 30s or 40s going back to her women's college for like a reunion. And all the people there were referred to by at least 3 different names. Like among themselves, they may be referred to by first name, and then they refer to by their last name. And then they're referred to by their titles, by what they do. Like somebody's the bursar, this one's a professor, that one is, this and that. And I could not make heads and tails of who anybody was. It was like one of those logic puzzles, where they go, Laura is the bursar who stayed 15 minutes and grabbed a burger at some place. It was like one of those, I could not make heads and tails of who's who. So I was like, never mind, I put it back. So fast forward a few years, I was reading Dorothy Sayers' stories. And then I realized, interestingly enough, there's actually a romance thread between her detective, Lord Peter Wimsey, and this woman named Harriet Vane. And so there's one book about them, and then the next book about them. And then I was really invested in their relationship. And then what was the third book? It was Gaudy Nights. And I was like, no.
Oh my God.
So because I was so into their story, I actually, went back to the library, dragged that book back out, and managed to make myself sort out who is who in that story. And when I got to the back half of the book when, when the hero came on the page and when, they met and things got, all romance got sorted out, was like, it's like so good. And so that's Dorothy Sayers. There are 4 Lord Peter Wimsey, Harriet Vane books. And then, of course, I want to recommend the Veronica Speedwell series by Deanna Rayborn, because she and I, our series are most often held up side by side. Mm-hmm. And I believe we are very much of the kind where people first came for the mysteries, but they're staying for the ship. So I'm like, there you go. If you like a good slow burn romance in your historical mysteries, you cannot go wrong with Deanna.
I love this. Yeah, I love like the fact that you come from one thing and then like the author sneaks into romance, it's like it's there and it's slow burn and you get invested in a relationship. You're like, oh, this is so good. Your serotonin along with the mystery, So.
Yeah, it's like an unbeatable combination, romance and mystery.
Yes, I am here for it. So tell us where you can find you online.
Find me online very easily at sherrythomas.com. I am at Sherry Thomas on Twitter, author Sherry Thomas on Facebook, and writer Sherry Thomas on Instagram.
Awesome. Thank you, Sherry, for being on the show.
Oh, it's lovely to be here.
If you enjoyed this podcast, feel free to share with friends, subscribe, rate, and review the show. This is the easiest way to support the podcast. Today's episode's partner is Libra FM. If you're an audiobook listener, then you should add Libra FM as your go-to source for paid audiobooks. Libra FM makes it possible for you to buy audiobooks through your local bookstore. Memberships start at $14.95, and they also have great sales for romance audiobooks each month for $3.99, thanks to the Kiss Club. To sign up for Libra FM, please visit whattoreadnextblog.com/LibraFM. You will receive a free audiobook when you sign up for a monthly subscription. If you purchase a subscription through our link, you will be supporting the podcast at no cost to you. The What to Read Next podcast is part of the Frolic Podcast Network. Please visit frolic.media/podcast to discover new shows to tune in. Thank you so much for listening and have a great day.